Hi everyone, I'm James Bell and welcome back to my studio here in Northumberland. I hope you've all been taking care of yourselves through this difficult situation with the coronavirus pandemic. I've had a lot more time on my hands since being at home, and I thought I would bring some new YouTube videos for you all to enjoy whilst at home, and I hope you enjoy the content I bring you. I'm hoping to do another album review very soon, but what have I got for today's show? Well, stay tuned and you can find out. So in today's video, I decided I would talk about my compositional process. And I've been asked a lot by my friends, James, how do you come up with your ideas? Where do you start? So I thought I would share with you all how I approach composition, where do I get my initial thoughts from, and how I go about it all from the initial process to actually doing the compositions themselves. So let's get started. I first started to really consider doing composition as a career whilst I was at university doing my music degree. And a friend of mine at university said to me, always write down your ideas, James. It doesn't matter what it is, just write it down. And so from that, and I remember he had a notebook and he showed me his ideas that he had written down. And so I did the same. So I bought a notebook and I filled it with ideas. It could be they were sometimes lyrical, there were sometimes, instrumental ideas. It didn't matter. If I had an idea, I wrote it down. And you can see I've got all these bits of paper. Some of them haven't seen the light of day in quite a while now. These were just ideas that I had. I didn't use all of these ideas. If I had an idea, I would write it down. And so that's my first tip. If you have an idea, whether you think it's a great idea or you think it's not, write it down, because then you've got it there. And no one else needs to see it. It might never see the light of day again. But the thing is that you don't know at the time whether it's going to lead somewhere or whether it's not. So just write it down. I think what surprised me the most when filling this notebook with ideas and things was how fast I filled it. I filled it pretty quickly, and it goes to show how many ideas you can have pass through your mind and think, oh, that's quite good, oh, okay. And you have that assumption that you're going to remember everything you come up with in a moment, and the truth is you don't. You forget quite quickly. There's been points where I've come up with an idea and written it down. Obviously, when you have a chance, write it down. There's always situations where you're somewhere and you think, oh, that's a good idea, but you might have a pen and paper handy or whatever. I get that too. But once I have a chance to write it down, I try to. And it's always surprising because after a few days, I might come back and look through my notebook and go, oh yeah, I forgot I came up with that idea. Oh, okay. And I might like it. So that's the kind of situation where I think, okay, I came up with an idea, and if I hadn't written it down, I wouldn't have remembered it half as well as what I've have now that writing it down has jogged my memory. And it just leads to more avenues to explore when you get a chance to sit down and work on things musically in the studio, when you're on your computer, in your digital audio workstation, or however you work when you compose. I have had a lot of people say to me, well, James, I'm struggling to even come up with ideas for composition. And I would say if you are in that boat and you are struggling, you might have an idea, but you might think it's really bad and it's not worth writing down. But honestly, write it down anyway, because the thing is that when I started writing all my ideas, a lot of them were unusable, but that didn't matter because no one else was going to see this. And the thing is that the more you write down, the more ideas I find. The more ideas that I wrote down, the more I found I had more to write about. So if you keep writing and keep coming up with ideas, there's more chance that there'll be one or two usable ideas that you'll have in the end. Oh, Tina, my cat's just joined me here. Say hello to Tina, everyone. So as time has gone on, I filled up that notebook, so then I had to use some new notebooks. And this is another one. This one, it's chocolate. Yum. And no, I didn't eat that corner, but I do love chocolate. It's really nice. But as you can see, it was more fun than practical, and it was literally falling apart. So I had to then turn to use a new notebook because this one was just falling apart and I couldn't use it anymore. But, you know, it's still nice, and yeah, Tina loves it. Do you want to rub yourself on that, Tina? Yes. Oh. She likes it, doesn't she? These two notebooks here, these are my most recent notebooks. This one was, I wrote it mainly during when I was doing my concept album, Diegesis. So some of these ideas ended up in that concept album that I did for my third year dissertation project at university. So if we look here, this is Prospects. So this ended up in the album. But a lot of these ideas didn't. But my main point is that some of these ideas you'll use, some of them you won't. And that's fine. But always write them down because you don't know whether it's going to be an idea that you use in the end or you're not. So it's always worth writing down. And I think a common misconception with writing ideas down, whether they be song lyrics or ideas for an instrumental, is that sometimes, yes, the idea that comes into your head is a vivid picture of what it is you want, and you know, that's it. I have had that before where I've got a very clear picture of what I want. Sometimes I've had an idea and I thought, okay, write it down, and then it turns and metamorphoses into something else, so then the finished project is something quite different to what it started out to be. That's also common too. So it was worth bearing that in mind. This notebook here, this is my studio notebook. And I use this during the compositional process. So I mainly use this notebook when I go into a studio and I might be setting up some microphones and I need to record whereabouts I place the microphones, mainly on drum kits, but it can be anything at all. This just kind of shows what I did for a vocal booth. It's a very basic setup, but you can also take pictures as well if you've got a smartphone handy, something like that. So then if you have to come back into the studio and redo that recording for whatever reason, you've got an exact you can replicate what you did first time if you need to get that same acoustic or whatever, because that's important too. And it's similar as well with if you're using synthesizers or keyboards. So for a recent composition, I've been doing some compositions in the last few weeks. I've been busy doing some compositions for fun, and one of these has been a composition called Fantasy Fight. And it's been really, really fun. So I've been mainly using my Roland GW8 keyboard, and it's got some really great sounds in there. And you can change them and manipulate the sounds using the different parameters on the keyboard. It's got some great reverb effects and some good distortion effects. And just in case I had to go back and re-record some bits, I made notes. I mean, this doesn't mean anything else to anyone else. It doesn't mean anything to anyone else. But it's just notes for me, so that if I have to go back and re-record bits, then I can get the same sounds, because otherwise you forget what you did to get that sound. So if you come up with a good sound on a synthesizer or keyboard, write down how you got that sound, record the parameters on each dial, because you'll just forget otherwise, because there's so many different parameters on a synthesizer, you just forget. Again, this one had the working title Antagonist, but I'm calling it Fantasy Fight. I'll talk about that at the end, because that's going to be on SoundCloud. It's also worth mentioning as well, when you are recording into an audio application, a digital audio workstation, there will be lots of different files, And if you're handling a lot of audio files and you want to find something quickly, if there's something particular that you like, write down what that audio file was called. So if you need to go through your folder with all the audio files in, you can find it easier, because there's nothing worse than having to trawl through loads of audio files when you're looking for something really particular that you recorded. It's just a nightmare otherwise. So I've used this notebook for that as well. And also I've worked using reel-to-reel or compact cassette, and there's something that I've done at some point on that reel-to-reel. If it's got like a counter, I might make a note of whereabouts it was on the tape using the counter, and that makes it easier to find when you're rewinding or fast forwarding too. So that's how I approach composition within the studio when I'm composing. When I come up with my initial ideas, I use notebooks to record down ideas, and it makes it so much easier rather than having to rely on your memory, because you're not going to remember everything. So always write things down, and even if you think it's not a good idea, it's probably better than what you think. And it's amazing the good it can do to leave an idea, write it down, leave it, and come back to it later on and see how you feel, because your perspective changes when you come back to something and look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. And that goes for anything in a compositional process, in any kind of creative process. It makes a huge difference. So that's my advice. So I hope you all enjoyed watching this video. And I mentioned that I've been working on some compositions for fun, and it's a new project I've been working on called Studio Bubble, and I'm uploading these compositions to SoundCloud, and they've just been, compositions I've been doing for fun, for you to enjoy, and I've called it Studio Bubble, this project, because it's music to listen to in isolation. So I'm hoping to do some different mixes of each track using different instrumentation, but that will come later on in the next few weeks, hopefully. But I'll put the link below this video for you to go and listen to the different tracks that I've done so far. I've done 3 so far. There's the antagonist one, which I've now named Fantasy Fight. There's one called 80 Spaceship, and there's another one called Requiem to the Sea. So go on to my SoundCloud page and have a listen to those and see what you think. So thank you again for watching today's video. I'll be back hopefully later this week with an album review, but we'll just see how I get on. But in the meantime, stay safe, keep well, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye everyone! So over the years, as I've filled notebooks up, I've had to use new notebooks, and that's happened.